The sea's calling. Will you pick up? The game begins with us hearing some weird words in a language we don't understand until we suddenly find ourselves underwater. I attempted to swim towards the light, but the game didn't really seem to like that. We swim through the wreckage of what seems to be a waterlogged house until we finally come across our mother's music box, but as we approach it, we find that we woke up and we've been dreaming this whole time. And the music box seems to be the cause of those dreams. Ever since our mother passed away and we got it, we've been afflicted by this kind of curse disease thing that has covered our arms in spots and has rendered us bedridden at all times, and after we've had to suffer through this for quite some time, our husband Harry has decided to head out to the other side of the world to an island 74 miles off the coast of Tahiti to try to find some sort of cure for whatever is ailing us. But after he stops sending us letters, we need to go on a quest to try to track him down. So we find ourselves on a boat about to dock. This is a puzzle adventure game with a ton of things to interact with in the environment, and we quickly learn that we can actually rotate everything that we pick up, so obviously we're going to have to rotate every single piece of paper to make sure there's nothing hidden on the other side. We also find that we brought a cane with us on this journey, which seems like it'll be kind of a reach for us to go exploring some super secret island without it. But we can't worry about that for right now though, because it's time to put on our crime-solving gloves. We also grab up our journal because we just have such a bad memory. We need to have something to reference all of the clues that we collect on our trip. We use the first clue that we found in the journal to unlock the trunk that we brought with us that we mysteriously received in the mail. We have no idea who sent this to us, but we find a picture of our husband with the note that says "Find him." There's also a key taped to the back that says 74 miles east of Tahiti, so we're definitely gonna be heading over there. We also find a weird kind of knife key thing and a reference image that we can use to try to track down the island we're headed towards. We leave our cabin and the captain of the ship we've been on puts the anchor down to let us off in our own little boat where we earn our first achievement for finishing up the prologue. Harry's been sending us letters the entire year that he's been out looking for this cure, but suddenly they stopped, and we know that he hired a crew to come out this way. So we head out on our little rowboat straight towards the island that we think will be the key to our problem. We manage to make landfall despite not paddling the boat even once, but our main character doesn't seem nearly as concerned about grabbing her luggage as I am. We find some signs that the island has been inhabited recently, but they seem to be warning us about something on the island. Little scary. But something about this island also seems to rejuvenate us. A woman who needed a cane to walk just a few weeks ago can now sprint around. That's pretty interesting. And as we're exploring around the first area, we find some signposts that we can figure out are a symbol representing water, so of course we go ahead and jot that down. Pressing on forward, we find a box that has the initials CW on it, which match the key that we were mailed. So, of course, we open that up and we find maybe the easiest puzzle in gaming history. Obviously, we're just getting warmed up here, but we uncover the secret that we need to progress further into the level. We slap that bad boy down and we activate the bags of sand, I guess, that are needed to open up the door to get us even deeper in. In this area, we find a picture of our husband's crew, which is great news because now we actually have confirmation that we're in the right place, probably. But after that, we hit our next roadblock. Every level of this game has one big puzzle that you're trying to solve, and for this one, it's figuring out this pretty simple bridge puzzle, but we'll come back to this later. We find and jot down another couple clues representing mountains and sunlight. I won't talk about every single clue that we find in this game because it would take forever, but for this first area, let's go through the actual process of solving a puzzle. Moving through the small mangrove swamp, we find an area that is absolutely filled to the gills with birds. Filled to the flock, filled to the feather, Most importantly though, here we find the symbol for birds, so that will definitely be useful to get that bridge unlocked. And in this little bird area, we find our first hidden item. Every chapter has one of these little hidden items that don't quite fit in with everything else we're seeing around us, but that's achievement number 2. I do a little bit of backtracking and uncover that I also missed the symbol for fish on the island, so now we have 5 out of 5 symbols and our journal pages are completely filled out, so we're at a point we can try out the puzzle. And also luckily for us, it just so happens that this bridge puzzle has the answer sheet written right on the back of it. So sun, bird, mountain, water, fish is the solution, and once we get all of that locked in, the bridge will open up for us. We go ahead and cross that bridge and enter a pretty dense forest where we earn our third achievement for finishing up Chapter 1, 74 miles east of Tahiti. As we begin Chapter 2, we walk into a village that has clearly been inhabited fairly recently, as we find evidence of our husband and his expedition have been here, but no actual people. But we also find an elevator of some sort, but it's missing a key component, so we'll have to find that part and come back. The first step to puzzle solving in this area is going to be taking note of all of these little statues throughout the area. We take a look at all of the little houses that have been set up by the people on the expedition, and we find that there are a couple gun cases that all seem to have been emptied out already. So hopefully whatever we encounter here, we won't need a gun for. We also discover that the first member of the crew has fallen. A guy named Roy actually died during this part of the expedition during some sort of big accident. We head up a small hill to the quote-unquote luxury cabins, and the first thing we see is a ripped up note that appears to be some sort of puzzle. I start putting it together, but I kind of assumed because it was ripped up we were going to need to explore around and find different pieces to this puzzle, but we actually could have solved it right now. I also got the puzzle completely put together, but for some reason I assumed it would fill the whole dark brown square, so I just didn't actually finish putting it together. This is kinda cringy in retrospect. Another feature of every level is finding a letter that our husband left for us but never got the chance to ship out, and in this one we find that he's looking back on Roy's death and saying that he'll go to any length to find a cure for our illness, but we see him standing in front of a big fire. We continue poking through our husband's things when we find a lens aligner, which sets us up with a kinda complicated looking puzzle that we absolutely don't have the tools to solve right now. We also find a telescope pointed directly at a shipwreck down on a nearby beach, so that's kind of concerning as well. We managed to get a foothold in the puzzles of this area by putting together the different parts of the little statues that we found, along with the pattern that we revealed with the ripped up note, which allows us to open up a secret compartment in the wall. In that back room, we find a secret hidden photograph that's actually the secret object of Chapter 2, earning us our next achievement, Weekend at Walakea's. We also find a stone brick that appears to have some sort of black ooze substance moving all over it. We don't know what this is, but this will probably help us. We throw our new stone piece into the floor and we activate the elevator that begins to elevate us up to the next level of this area. Up top, we find the tent of the expedition's doctor, who got covered in some sort of black ooze substance and, looking at his notes, appears to be going through a little bit of a rough time. We see some weirdly graphic images involving with that big accident that was referenced earlier, and we also see some reference images that he appears to have some spots just like we do after coming into contact with the ooze. So with all of that fresh in mind, we find the hole where the accident happened, and we decide to climb on down a rickety rope ladder straight to where it all happened. Down in the pit, we find some eye-like shapes that are oozing the black liquid, and when we interact with them, we see a sight of somebody drowning in black liquid. Totally normal stuff down here. We walk down the hallway to take a look at some more of the temple and some of the paintings on the wall when we earn the achievement Interesting for listening to 25% of the story logs. We click on some more of those eyes and take some more notes on what the visions are showing us, before we head back to the lens aligner to try to combine those three eye shapes together to give us a lens that is actually usable. We pop the lens out and we insert it into the telescope, and once we look through the new telescope lens, we see up into the sky and a little bit of a vision with some stars and stuff. And after a closer look, we get a little pattern to pop out. We take that pattern we saw from the stars or whatever, and we go back into the pit where we enter the pattern, which pops up a button in the center that of course we have to go hit. And doing that makes the pit that we've been in slowly start to fill with black ooze. We probably should have seen this coming, but we are actually pretty trapped. The screen fades to black, but we earn the achievement for completing Chapter 2 called the Everhart Expedition. When we come to, we find that we are marching without control of our legs towards the edge of a cliff and some sort of gigantic sea monster in the distance. And when we get up to the very edge of the cliff, we just decide to walk right off. We land in the water where we continue swimming towards that giant creature before things once again cut to black. We wake up on the beach next to that shipwreck we saw earlier. Everything is super dark as it's nighttime now, and every puzzle game needs the obligatory level that feels kind of like a horror game. We walk around the ship and find that once again another camp has been set up right here, but this one seems a little bit different. There's spots for a lot more people here, and also the power seems to have gone out, but maybe we can get that reconnected and we can take a closer look at some of the other things around the area. But one thing that does work without electricity is a voice recording we find that shows that the doctor, who was covered in the black ooze, seems to have gotten a little bit upset and attempted to attack another member of the expedition. So things aren't looking super great about the whole ooze thing. We won't think about it. This area also has the secret item for Chapter 3, where we earn the achievement Marsh Cannery for picking up this weird looking can. Walking around a little bit more, I notice an area where some of the lights are still on. We walk up to the top of the hill, and this definitely feels like the final puzzle of the area, so I decide to go ahead and head on back and find some more clues first. I finally approach the ship, and we notice that a giant hunk out of the side has been ripped, looking like kind of a sea monster attack or something. But we also won't think too hard about that, as we need to get the electricity back on before anything else. We head up to the helm of the ship where we hear Harry's voice speaking, but as we actually get into the room, we find that they've just left a recording of his voice crying out for help, left repeating over and over again trying to get the crew saved. Seems like this didn't work. We find the electrical box and get power restored to the beach, so things are perfect now. We have a bright glowing target right on the edge of the water where a sea monster definitely won't attack us. Everything is going perfectly. Now that power's up and running, we can go back to Harry's tent where he left a nice slideshow for us that has some helpful hints for working on the next puzzle. And don't worry, Harry worked at the University of Denver, so we know this guy is super good at puzzles and all that. But this slideshow also has another secret. If you click to the end of it, you find a woman jumping into some black ooze before getting transformed into some sort of sea monster humanoid thing. And we earn an achievement for taking a look at that. Things are pretty weird here. Finally, with theoretically all of the hints we need in tow, we decide to head up to take a look at the final puzzle of this area. This is probably the hardest puzzle in this game, I would say. The solution here involves opening up the correct channels based on some notes that we can find back in the camp. But we actually don't have all the information we need, so I spent a lot of time here messing around before I actually had the answer to what I wanted. Eventually we return to Harry's tent and find that there was a keyboard we missed, and we need to overlay the keys on the keyboard with the frequencies that we found earlier, and then we can get the missing information that we've needed this whole time. So now that I finally actually know what the solution to this puzzle is supposed to be and what it was looking for, I can return to this giant organ that we're trying to play. By the way, that's the whole thing that we're doing here. We're playing music to try to open up a hole in the side of the mountain. It's all really great stuff. Eventually though, we managed to get all of the correct channels opened up and the correct ones closed down, and we can summon this giant black bridge in front of us. And as we walk along the bridge, we earn the achievement Seaside Serenade for playing that ancient instrument. We climb a little spire, and at the top we find yet another note from Harry. A weird place to leave this one, but he's talking about how he and the rest of the crew have dwindled down quite a bit, and spirits are not particularly high at this point. And immediately next to that letter, we find yet another ancient instrument that we hit the buttons on, which opens up the next path. This island is really musical now for some reason. Hitting these buttons play like different notes, and that's what puts it all together. We continue on through the newly opened path as we earn the achievement for completing Chapter 3, The Vanishing of the Lady Shannon. When we come back from the black screen, Nora says, "Whew, what a hike," to let us know that it has been quite a while for her, but just a little bit of time for us, the audience. One of those classic Hollywood tricks. At the top of the mountain, we find an electrical tower that was created from basically nothing by Frank from the expedition. This is pretty impressive, but I'm more impressed with earning the achievement halfway there for finding 50% of the story logs. We also find that Frank died next to his great creation, getting a lot of character development in this section. We find that the way the crew was getting their power was through a water wheel, but the water wheel isn't connected to the water. Those silly billies, Frank couldn't have been that good at his job, huh? We can't get any of the electricity stuff to work right off the bat, so we'll have to come back to this later, I guess. This is yet another tune-based puzzle solution. We found that they set up homemade loudspeakers around this entrance to some sort of temple. They aren't working currently with the power outage, but they will be activated once we can get a certain tune into the microphone and amplified up to the door. When the previous expedition tried out this amplified sound technique, they accidentally caused a landslide that crushed all of their tents. Yikes, I guess we better be a little bit more careful than they were. The first step to this next puzzle is not very interesting, so we'll go ahead and skip it. Basically, there were patterns with the different stone faces, and once we activate them on the corresponding columns, the waterfall gets shifted to hit the water wheel. Once the water wheel is actually moving, we do another pretty easy puzzle where we walk over to some gears and we need to get them lined up one at a time to actually be able to hit the moving gear from the water wheel. This chapter was a big step down in the difficulty of the puzzles, but I'm not going to complain too much. We climb another of Frank's famously super sturdy ladders to activate the electricity now that we've got everything up and running. But Nora loses her temper a little bit when things don't immediately work with this system that's been rained on so much, and she punches the box, which knocks us to the ground. We awake in the desert, pretty much the opposite of where we've been up to this point, and we see a bunch of skulls and bones and stuff dotted all around. But they don't seem like creatures that I've seen before. They seem like maybe sea creatures. We decide to continue pressing forward, but this is a little bit scary. As we move forward, it becomes more and more apparent that this seems to be an ocean that dried up, which is surely a good sign for things to come. We walk the length of the dried ocean, and eventually we come up to a much more wet area. We climb up a little bridge that seems to lead to our house that is filled with water. We take our first step inside the glowing blue door, and Nora seems pretty convinced that this is in fact their house, but a little bit waterlogged. We take a look at a postcard on the shelf that definitely stands out as we earn our next achievement, Greetings from Yanalithe. I don't know, but that's the secret object in Chapter 4. When we finally inspect the last thing there is to see in our house, it's the music box that this whole thing was caused by. It's playing a very nice melody that will be pretty important for us in a minute, but the screen fades to black and we earn the achievement 506 East Hamden Avenue for crossing the desert. We come to back in the real world, and now we have a great idea for the melody to open up the door on the mountain. The power's back on, so we approach the microphone and begin our singing. And just so happens we have perfect pitch because we used to sing all the time, and that song is just what we needed to actually get the doorway open. So when those guys before caused that big landslide, all they needed to do was fall off a ladder and then have a genius idea. Duh. We walk inside the mountain temple, and honestly I expected the chapter to end right here, but it doesn't. We actually just keep on trucking. We find a patented rope ladder that shows us the crew actually did manage to get in here after all. Another feature of these hollowed grounds are murals up on the wall that show some sort of creature being bathed in black ooze and then gaining distinctly fish-like features. Maybe reptilian, but regardless, it's not super exciting given everything that we've been through. We take another elevator up and we find another puzzle. I was kind of surprised that there was another puzzle at the end of this, but I guess those first couple were pretty easy, so we needed something a little bit more challenging. We find another note from Harry, and he seems to have come to the conclusion there is nothing he can do to stop the illness. Whatever we have in our blood will keep on spreading and spreading until it takes over. But he's going to keep pressing forward, and so will we. I've been sitting here for quite a while trying to come up with a good way to explain the solution to this puzzle, and honestly, I can't without just fully walking through the solution. Basically, you're trying to pair those words and the numbers in the bottom right with the phases on the face of these little stone circle things, and once we get all of them set up correctly, we can open up the doorway into the next area. Through that doorway is another puzzle, but this one is short and easy at least. We find another musical instrument, this time this little 3-piece drum set that we tap in a pretty slow game of Simon Says until eventually things start to happen. Once we correctly do what Sam says, we open up this portal that we're of course gonna go touch. The gateway has a component to stick our hand in, so we unglove our hand and we go ahead and tap that. The screen fades to black and we earn the achievement Quite the Show for completing Chapter 4. When Chapter 5 begins, we're once again under the water, but looking at our hands, things seem a little bit more real. Our spots are quite a bit more pronounced, and we are webbed and ready to swim. This one doesn't feel like a dream. We swim through this small new tutorial area where we find another gateway. We throw our webbed hand on that, and we're quickly shown we're back on land. So we can go through these portals to switch between land mode and water mode. This area also introduces us to the worst underwater recurring puzzle. Basically, we need to get these two green streams to match at the same time, but the puzzle is always laid out the same way, so it's just a timing thing. But once we get it down, we can open up these valves that allow us to move into new areas. We exit water mode and we stumble into a little village, though this one doesn't seem to be occupied by the expedition we've been following. They've got these weird little stone structures and little pools in each of the houses, and when we view them, we see that the people that lived here were called the Nakal, who seem to have been slaves to some sort of great masters. While walking around, we learn that the different families that lived in this little village are distinguished by the different colors and patterns, and the water level of this place was controlled by a vote by each of the families. So that explains the little stone things that we've been seeing in each of the little areas. This is actually maybe one of my favorite puzzles in the entire game. We find this pillar that has each of the different colors and patterns marked on a wall, and we can use these symbols in the order that they are going up the wall to determine the order that the vote needs to be, so then we go around and mark the stone items which allow us to open up the water. The final vote that gets cast is purple, so we head over to the final voting block where we hit the button and it unlocks the switches we can use to control the water level. Pretty neat stuff. I really like this one, especially with the storytelling that was worked into it. So now with the water level drastically lowered, we get access to the gateway that we didn't previously have access to, and we can hop back into the water to go back to our classic water antics. Our first antic is to find another one of those little pools, where we learn that the Nakal are now water animals, and these water animals live forever. Oh, I see. That's pretty interesting for us. Our second antic is to earn the achievement Underwater Royalty by finding the hidden crown that is the secret object of this level. After that, we do another one of the valve puzzles, and I'm not talking Portal 2. This allows us to open up a pretty big system where we get pushed along by the water very quickly, and we go through some pretty cool views actually. We get some real nice looks at the underwater city and a lot of fish and stuff swimming around. This is honestly so great. We also see the eye of another pretty large looking sea creature peeking in at us, but he doesn't seem particularly angry actually. Once we reach the end of the Little Mermaid ride, we earn the achievement Dark Water Ride for taking the big stream through the sunken town. We hop out of the water again and find some more evidence that Harry has been in the area. No idea how he got over here, but we learn that he is in the A Quiet Place school of keeping notes about the things he's trying to figure out. We find another note from Harry and learn that the expedition is down to just 2 members at this point, himself and a reporter named Cass. Harry also has come to the realization while he can't cure whatever we have going on, maybe he can become like us. The original inhabitants went to a sanctuary where they performed a ritual to become the water creatures, so he's gonna try to do that too. Ugh. This area ends in the only way that it possibly could have, with another one of these valve puzzles, this time being a lot more complicated, but still it's just a timing exercise. But once we get the timing down, it summons a little cart for us and we can head to the final sanctuary. We drift off into the darkness and earn the achievement Sunken for completing Chapter 5. We continue our new water boat ride out into the open water where we see some more of the sea creatures firsthand. And we kind of figure out at this point that the creatures don't really mind us at all. In fact, they're kind of welcoming us back, but they were a little bit more aggressive towards the people that weren't related to this island. Finally, our ride comes to an end and we look upon the final sanctuary where we need to try to track down Harry once and for all, no matter the state he's in. The first thing that I notice about this area is the two tents are very far apart, and the notes we're finding make it seem like these two really cannot stand each other at this point. That's good because I kinda thought this might be like a cheating story at this point, but thankfully it's not. We continue to survey the lands when we notice there is a gun sitting on these steps up to the temple. We also see a large splatter of blood, a fired shell, and a woman's earring that's sitting on the ground. These are all pretty bad signs. We find our final letter from Harry, and he establishes that he really doesn't trust Cass to help him finish up the journey at this point, and she's kind of just out for herself. But he's thinking if he can mix his blood with the black ooze, maybe he can go ahead and make his transformation complete. So I guess we'll see what we find when we get in there. Before we take a step into the actual temple, I decided to go ahead and stop by the local fish head and get a little bit of a tattoo on my hand. Why this? I don't know. We saw a fish head. Let's go ahead and do it, right? Let's see what happens. Shake it up. Alright, with the fish head and our new tattoo out of the way, we can finally approach the sacrifice bowl and cut our hand and place it into the bowl to open up the door to the sanctuary, because our blood is special and whatever, black ooze, all that. We also earn the achievement Deep Cut for actually opening up the sanctuary gates in this way. Inside the temple we find another pretty cool puzzle, but this one is again not super interesting to watch me solve. We look up to the sky and we see some constellations, so we're gonna need to use that obviously. We also find that this room has 4 doors, each one of them having a segment of that first constellation on it, so we walk around and record those in our journal as well. We also find that there are these stone wheels that overlook a diagram in the center, and the buttons on the stone wheel happens to match with the tattoo we have on the palm of our hand. And there's also 4 other symbols, so you can probably guess where this is going. We create the pattern with the symbols that we've unlocked, which opens the corresponding door. Then once we make it to the end of the section behind that door, we find another one of these fish heads where we can get another tattoo, and we repeat until we get all of the tattoos we need to make the whole constellation. Honestly, pretty cool puzzle. This ranks up there for sure with my favorites in this game. The only puzzle that's really worth noting happens to be the only puzzle that I'll need to return to in the post-game. It involves moving these different cannons around, and then we can summon little bridges using them. This is another pretty cool one. This was a nice little puzzle. We proceed to the end of the room and get our final tattoo. But as we're leaving that room, I noticed that there was a mural that I haven't looked at yet, and luckily I did because I earned the achievement written in stone right here for looking at all of the murals. Surprised I got them all in one playthrough, to be honest. We return to the main chamber where we enter in the final constellation. This unlocks the door to the big final chamber where this final showdown will take place, and we happen to earn the achievement, I'll make a note of that, for finding all of the puzzle notes throughout the game. We move into this absolutely stunning final chamber as we earn the achievement The Amazing Adventures of Nora Everhart for listening to all of the story-based audio logs. This room is kinda sick, man, you must admit. We walk to the end of the room and we see a little throne sitting down on the ground. The floor is distinctly more green than the previously black ooze, and we notice that that must be Harry sitting on the throne with a failed transformation. We rush towards the body that is clutching the music box as we see Harry's classic glasses that he never takes off sitting next to the body. The game cuts to black, but suddenly we're back in our house, and we learn that Harry never actually performed the ritual. But how could Nora possibly know that? We just saw him sitting right there in that throne. Not to interrupt like the end of the story too much or anything, but we also earn the achievement Fall Goffin for completing chapter 6 right here. Sorry. We step outside the room of the house into this glowing staircase area that we've never seen before, and we get the final explanation of the story. Cassandra was the only person left, so she must be the one that died. She wanted to claim the power of whatever was in the temple for herself, so she shot Harry with his own gun before she moved in to try to claim it. When Cass attempted the ritual, she obviously failed, as we saw before, because the ritual isn't meant for regular people like Harry or Cass. But then why did Harry fake his own death, putting his glasses right next to that corpse before returning back to Tahiti to send us that mysterious package that we found at the beginning of the game? And the answer to that is actually pretty simple. The bond between Harry and Nora was so strong that Harry knew Nora would never go through with the ritual unless he was already dead and she had nothing to lose. Going through with the ritual would get rid of all of the pain she's suffered through her illness, and he thought that would be best for her. So now this game that's actually been pretty linear up to this point leaves us with a choice: accept our fate and leave Harry, or reject our fate and return home. And this seems like maybe a hard choice from Nora's perspective. But while the choice might be hard for Nora, it wasn't hard for me. This story has led me to believe the love for Harry trumps all else, and I choose to reject our fate and the water ritual and to return home to Harry. We emerge back out onto the beach that we covered so long ago to find that our boat is missing, but the boat that we came in initially is docked and waiting for us, so we are free to head on home. The game ends with a nice monologue by Harry many years later reflecting back on Nora's death. After Nora returned home, they had a few more good years left together. Obviously though, the illness took Nora eventually, as she didn't go through with the ritual. But this is kind of a fitting ending. And this was a really good story. Getting to the end here was actually legitimately sad, and I felt very connected to the two main characters of this game. Harry's left all alone, but he would have been regardless if we had gone through with the ritual or not, so at least we got that time left together. We earned the achievement, the only thing I have now for completing the game, and now it's time to dive into everything else that we missed. Luckily, this game has a chapter select because I actually managed to miss an achievement in every single chapter of this game, so let's go ahead and start again from the top. We also immediately earn the achievement Play It Again Nora for choosing to replay a level. Nice. The first couple of achievements are related to doubling back at points that I previously didn't. After completing the bridge puzzle in the first area, we return to the beach and find our boat missing to earn the achievement Gently Down the Stream. And in Chapter 2, we return to the backside of the elevator after we've used it once to find the Raw Fury logo, which is the publisher's self-insert achievement called Fawning Developers. Next up, I return to the ship in Chapter 3, where I find a very hidden tape recorder that is documenting the ship actually being attacked by the monster and crashing onto the beach. Listening to this, we earn the achievement The Lady Shannon Recording. The next achievement is called You Looked That Up in a Guide, and you're right, I definitely wouldn't have got this without looking it up in a guide. We return to that little piano that we found and we play the melody from the music box in Chapter 4 in this item that is found in Chapter 3. Back in Chapter 4, I attempted to make Nora sing into the microphone before we turn the power on. This is by activating the microphone twice, which gets the little tune to play. I actually tried to do this one, but for some reason it wouldn't let me use it twice in the first playthrough, so we almost got this one, but we didn't. Achievement number 30 comes from returning to the desert level and opening up our little journal while we're in there. We find a very messy family tree that we definitely didn't draw in to earn the achievement The Noranomicon. After that, I get the punishment of replaying the entirety of Chapter 5 to earn the achievement Nakal Vision. I missed out on clicking on one of the underwater pools in this section, so I had to do everything once again. That was kind of frustrating because I literally only missed one thing. And finally, we are in the final chapter of the game here, Chapter 6. We return to that level where we were creating the bridges with the little cannon things, and I missed out on a little side path where we find a picture of the big sea monster himself. This earns us the achievement Candid Photo, as this was the one secret object we missed. I want to give a big shout out to all of the achievements in this game being pretty cool. This is another one that was unlikely for me to get, but maybe if you put in a specific constellation layout in the final area, you can get a little clip of the developer's next game called American Arcadia. I like this, nice little nod. So the only thing left for us to do now is to choose the alternate ending that we didn't grab the first time around. In this ending, we open up the door and find ourselves in a weird swirling expanse. We go ahead and open up the music box that gives a path out in front of us. As we're walking down this main path, there is a little bit of a side path that is barely visible that we can actually take a little trip down. At the end of the path, we earn the achievement Meta Reference because we find the Out of the Blue key. This is a reference to the name of the developer, and while I appreciate that being a kind of cool thing to find and something you probably wouldn't see your first time through, I don't know about putting this little side path in like the big kind of bad ending version of your game. It just kind of takes you out of the action, you know? Maybe I'm wrong though, you know, I'm not a game dev. But even without being a game dev, I can now say I did everything in Call of the Sea. I'm gonna go ahead and leave the ending that we didn't actually look at playing in the background here while I do my end of game recap. The main things that you need to know is basically we walk to the end of this big bridge and then we see the big sea creature, we get accepted by the clan, and that's pretty much how it ends. We cut to another version of Harry talking about his life, but this time post Nora, and everything is of course very, very sad. So we completed this game in about 8.5 hours, but some of that time I accidentally left the game running a little bit, so that time isn't super accurate. You could definitely do this game much quicker though if you used a guide, though that would kind of take some of the fun out of it, I think. Overall, I've got to say, I came into this game with basically no expectations. I had no idea what this game was going to be about. I basically only knew it was a story game with a woman protagonist, and that was enough to sell me on it, right? But this game was actually really, really fun. Now, compared to a lot of puzzle games, it definitely kept us on rails for a lot of it. We couldn't just go wander out into the jungle or anything, but that was kind of okay. It kept you on the main path. A couple of the puzzles were a little bit tricky to solve, but for the most part, things were relatively easy to get together. And I've got to say, the story really impressed me, to the point that I actually looked up American Arcadia after finishing this game, and I wouldn't be very surprised if I do a playthrough of it in the very near future. I say that after playing a lot of these games, but man, I was very impressed with the storytelling of this game, and the end of it was actually like legitimately touching. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, or if you have any other suggestions for games you'd like to see me check out, please feel free to leave those as well. As always, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope to see you next time as well. See ya!